we on the brink of a financial collapse that could affect every Social Security recipient in America? The United States is facing an escalating debt crisis, and the recently signed Big Beautiful Bill may be making things worse, not better. While this bill promises no taxes on tips and overtime and offers relief for working Americans, it also adds trillions to the national deficit. If you're relying on Social Security, Medicare, or just trying to make ends meet on a fixed income, this rising debt could mean tighter budgets, reduced benefits, or delayed payments down the line. On Social Security Posts, we're committed to helping you understand how major legislation like this impacts your financial future. This is something that I put. But before we dive deep into the consequences of this new law, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Social Security Post, and leave your questions in the comments below. Your voice matters, and we're here to keep you informed every step of the way. The national debt is now spiraling beyond what many Americans thought possible. As of this year, the U.S. government is carrying more than $37 trillion in debt, a number that's hard to even comprehend. But this isn't just about numbers on a government ledger. It's about real consequences for everyday people. The roots of this crisis are tangled in years of poor fiscal choices, excessive borrowing, and a political system more focused on short-term wins than long-term stability. Whether you want to call it greed, corruption, or just plain mismanagement, the truth is this: the U.S. is sinking deeper into financial quicksand. What's even more alarming is that this debt is fueling a global shift, what economists call de-dollarization. This means other countries are slowly reducing their dependence on the US dollar as the world's primary reserve currency. It's not an overnight change, but the slow erosion of trust in America's financial leadership. That loss of confidence makes it harder to borrow cheaply, creates pressure on interest rates, and could weaken the dollar's buying power. For seniors and Social Security recipients, that could translate into inflation eating away at fixed benefits, higher medical costs, and more uncertainty when planning for retirement. At first glance, President Trump's Big Beautiful Bill has generated excitement across the country. For millions of workers, the promise of no taxes on overtime and tips feels like long overdue relief. These changes mean that many Americans might finally keep more of what they earn, and in tough times, every extra dollar matters. But behind the applause and headlines lies a much deeper issue. This bill comes with a massive financial price tag. While workers may celebrate these tax breaks now, the broader impact on the national debt threatens to undo those gains in the years ahead. Think back to the last stimulus checks, those one-time $1,200 payments that were meant to provide quick relief. Yes, they helped temporarily, but the long-term trade-off was soaring inflation. The cost of housing, groceries, insurance, and utilities shot up, and retirees felt the sting more than anyone. This new bill risks repeating that pattern: short-term relief in exchange for long-term pain. The truth is, when the government offers crumbs to the public, it often takes the whole pie elsewhere in the form of inflated asset values that benefit the wealthy. And while some Americans enjoy minor tax savings, the rest are left navigating a more expensive economy and a shrinking safety net. When it comes to understanding the long-term costs of any new law, the Congressional Budget Office, or CBO, is the gold standard for nonpartisan analysis. Their projection for President Trump's Big Beautiful Bill is deeply concerning. According to the CBO, this bill alone is expected to add $3.4 trillion to the federal deficit over the next 10 years. That figure isn't a typo, and it's not a vague estimate. It's based on the actual policies written into the law and how they affect federal spending and revenue collection. While some might argue that the added deficit is manageable over a decade, the real problem is that the impact hits hardest in the next few years. The deficit increase is front-loaded, meaning the damage happens early and fast. In 2026, just 1 year after implementation, the bill is projected to add $500 billion to the deficit. By 2027, that figure jumps to over $600 billion. This rapid expansion of the deficit isn't just about red ink on a budget sheet. It means more borrowing, more pressure on interest rates, and more competition for limited government funds. In practical terms, every additional dollar borrowed today could be a dollar not spent on Social Security, cost of living adjustments, Medicare improvements, or affordable senior housing tomorrow. One of the most vocal critics of the Big Beautiful Bill has been Senator Rand Paul, who didn't mince words when calling it fiscally irresponsible. According to him, this bill is not just expensive, it's reckless. During a recent speech, Senator Paul highlighted that the bill contains over $500 billion in new spending, much of it added hastily to win over specific lawmakers. For instance, at least $50 billion was included at the last minute for a hospital fund to secure a key vote. None of this money exists in the budget. It's all borrowed. A charge to the national credit card that future generations, including today's seniors, may be forced to pay. What Senator Paul is really warning us about is the erosion of financial discipline. When Congress starts adding billions in unplanned spending just to push a bill through, it signals a government that's no longer acting in the public's long-term interests. For Social Security recipients and retirees, this kind of budget chaos is a red flag. Every dollar spent without a funding source increases the chance that future Social Security benefits could be delayed, reduced, or frozen altogether. And it's not fear-mongering. It's simple math. More debt means more risk to the programs that Americans depend on most. Let's break this down in the simplest terms. This year, the U.S. government expects to bring in around $5 trillion in tax revenue. Sounds like a lot, right? But here's the problem. It plans to spend $7 trillion. That's a $2 trillion shortfall, money that doesn't exist and must be borrowed. This is the kind of imbalance that creates massive debt over time. And with each passing year, that gap isn't shrinking, it's growing. No household could survive on this kind of financial model. And yet our government continues down this dangerous path. Now, why does this matter to someone collecting Social Security or depending on Medicare? Because when spending outpaces revenue, lawmakers have to make hard choices. They'll either borrow more, raise taxes, or start making cuts. And guess which programs often end up on the chopping block? Entitlements like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and food assistance, programs millions rely on. So while some Americans might be celebrating short-term tax breaks from the new bill, the long-term consequence is clear. We're spending far more than we're bringing in, and the people who will feel the pinch first are often the ones with the least room to give. One of the most overlooked dangers of rising national debt is the cost of interest, and that cost is exploding. Think of it like a credit card bill. The more you borrow, the more interest you pay, and the less you have left to spend on essentials. The US government is now spending hundreds of billions of dollars each year just to cover the interest on its debt. And that figure is only climbing. As the debt from the big beautiful bill piles on, we're looking at a future where interest payments eat up a growing share of the federal budget. This leaves fewer resources for critical programs like Social Security, Medicare, veteran services, and public infrastructure. Here's the real danger. Interest payments are not optional. They must be paid no matter what. That means if money gets tight due to a recession, a natural disaster, or even a political stalemate, the first things to face delays or cuts aren't the interest checks going to creditors, they're the programs serving real people. Seniors may see slower cost of living increases, delayed processing for new benefits, or even frozen payouts during fiscal emergencies. And as debt grows, so does the portion of your tax dollars that goes straight to banks and bondholders instead of the programs that help American families. It's a hidden tax on your future. If you've ever wondered how serious this debt crisis really is, consider this. The big, beautiful bill came with a $5 trillion increase to the debt ceiling. Now think about what that means. The debt ceiling is essentially the government's credit limit. If this new law was supposed to reduce the deficit, why would we need to raise that limit by such a massive amount? The truth is, despite what some politicians are claiming, the numbers don't lie. A $5 trillion hike signals that everyone in Washington knows more borrowing is coming. And not just a little, a lot. This is not a small administrative tweak. Raising the debt ceiling by $5 trillion acknowledges that spending will continue at unsustainable levels and that taxes and revenues won't come close to covering the gap. That should deeply concern anyone depending on government programs. Social Security recipients in particular should pay attention. A government running on borrowed money is a government forced to make compromises when things go wrong. And when tough choices come, and they will, benefit programs could be among the first areas targeted for restructuring, delays, or limits. Some supporters of the big, beautiful bill point to President Trump's tariff policies as a source of financial relief. And yes, the numbers are impressive on the surface. In June alone, the federal government collected $28 billion from tariffs. If that rate continues, it would total around $336 billion for the year, a sizable boost in revenue. Tariffs are essentially taxes on imported goods, and when used wisely, they can protect domestic industries and raise money without increasing income taxes on citizens. But here's the catch. While $336 billion sounds like a lot, the government is projected to spend $7 trillion this year. Tariffs would cover less than 5% of that total spending. So even with strong tariff revenue, it's not nearly enough to offset the $2 trillion annual deficit. Relying on tariffs alone to fix the debt crisis is like using a garden hose to fight a forest fire. And there's another layer to this. Tariffs often raise prices on imported goods, which can contribute to inflation. That hurts seniors and low-income families the most, especially those on fixed incomes. So while tariffs can help around the edges, they're not a cure-all, they're a piece of the puzzle, but far from a solution to the deeper fiscal hole we're digging for ourselves. Supporters of the current administration have pointed to massive savings through federal programs like DOGE, officially claiming they've saved $190 billion for the country. That sounds like a win, right? But once you dig deeper, the picture changes. That $190 billion is a 10-year projection, not an immediate return. Most of that savings is tied up in future cost reductions, long-term lease adjustments, and accounting tweaks that may or may not play out over time. For the year 2025, the real savings, just $19 billion. And when you consider that the federal government spends about $19 billion every single day, the savings vanish in a flash. This is where political messaging and real-world math part ways. Elected officials often highlight big future numbers to make their programs look better on paper, but in practical terms, these savings don't help with this year's deficit. They don't reduce interest payments, they don't cover new benefit expansions, or ensure full Social Security funding. In fact, depending on future cost cutting that hasn't happened yet could be risky, especially if unexpected events force more emergency spending. Seniors and taxpayers alike deserve transparency, not hopeful projections dressed up as fiscal solutions. Sometimes the clearest sign of trouble is right in front of us. By May of this year, the federal government had already overspent by $1.36 trillion in fiscal year 2025. That's even worse than the same time last year when the deficit hit $1.2 trillion by May 2024. These aren't projections or estimates, they're real numbers, and they're heading in the wrong direction fast. This tells us that despite all the promises of savings and economic growth, the spending is still outpacing revenue by a huge margin. And with the new bill in full effect, those deficits are only expected to grow in the coming months. This is especially concerning for Social Security recipients and retirees. A growing deficit means that more of the federal budget is being eaten up by interest payments and unplanned costs, leaving less flexibility for benefit increases, Medicare improvements, or emergency assistance. It also makes Social Security reform harder because any adjustment now comes with the added pressure of managing ballooning debt. The fact that this year's deficit is worse than last year's, even before the bill's full costs are realized, is a loud warning. If things are already this bad mid-year, what happens when recession, global tension, or disaster strikes? For decades, the US dollar has been the bedrock of the global economy, the trusted currency used by nations around the world. But that status is starting to slip. And 2025 is shaping up to be one of the worst years for the dollar in the last half century. Central banks across the globe are reducing their dollar holdings and turning to gold instead. This shift, known as de-dollarization, is slow and subtle, but its long-term impact could be enormous. If fewer countries trust or use the dollar, the US loses a key economic advantage, the ability to borrow cheaply and influence global trade. This matters deeply for Social Security recipients. If the dollar weakens significantly, it will drive up the cost of imported goods, from medicine to food to fuel. Inflation will hit even harder, eroding the purchasing power of fixed benefits. Worse, a less powerful dollar can make the debt crisis worse by increasing borrowing costs, reducing investor confidence, and further shrinking the funds available for senior programs. While the shift away from the dollar won't happen overnight, it's already underway, and ignoring it now could mean paying a much higher price later. The numbers don't lie. America's debt is growing faster than ever, and while the big beautiful bill may offer short-term tax breaks and popular reforms, it also adds trillions to our deficit, increases borrowing, and threatens long-term economic stability. Social Security recipients, retirees, and working families need to stay alert. Every new dollar borrowed today could mean tougher choices tomorrow, especially when it comes to benefits, healthcare, and the rising cost of living. As global confidence in the US dollar shift, the impacts will ripple through every corner of our economy, including the programs millions depend on. If you're concerned about how these changes affect your Social Security, Medicare, or your retirement plans, you're not alone, and that's why we're here. Social Security Post, We'll continue to track every twist and turn in this economic story so you never miss an update that matters to your future. Please like this video, subscribe to Social Security Post, and share your questions or experiences in the comments below. Your voice matters, and together we can stay informed and prepared.